This is Stein, and I'm going to show you a few methods to create 3D or 3D-like buttons using Adobe Photoshop Creative Suite 1. We start by going to the File menu and choosing New to create a new canvas. Click OK, and there's my new canvas. Now the first thing I want to do is create a layer for my new button. Come to the Layer menu, choose New, choose Layer. Now it's time to make a selection on my layer that will be the shape of the button. And I may want to use some guides by left-clicking on the ruler and dragging over so that I've got a clear idea of what my final button shape's going to look like. I want to make a button here that's about 150 pixels wide and about 50 pixels high. Now I come and make sure that I've got my marquee tool selected here in the top left corner of the toolbar. I'm going to make a square button, so the rectangular marquee tool is fine. I'm going to position my cursor at one of the corners of the area marked off by my guides, left click, and drag to the opposite corner. And there's my selection for a new button. To block in a color, I simply want to choose a color using either my swatches or my color slider. When I've got a color selected, I simply right-click on my selection and choose Fill. It will prompt me to use the foreground color for the content of the fill, which is fine, so I click OK. And there I have a green shape, which is a button. Now let's apply some 3D effects. One of the most common 3D effects to apply to a button is the bevel effect. To do so, come to the Layers menu in the bottom right-hand corner. Click the Layer Styles button and choose Bevel and Emboss. This brings up the Layer Style menu and starts us off with beveling and embossing. Currently, if you look at the preview and if you look at your canvas, you can see what will happen with the default bevel applied. This is an inner bevel and the technique is smooth. You may want to change that technique to something like chisel hard. Click OK, and there's my button. Let's create another button here that uses a little bit of a different effect. Let's say we want a button that's not just rectangular, but has some curved edges. First, I'm going to go to Layer and choose a new layer. I'm going to name this Curve Corner Button. And now let's get some guides in place for my new button. I'll make this approximately the same size as the button I just made, just for reference. With my guides in place, I want to go to my magnifier tool, and I'm going to left click and drag around the area that I selected to zoom in. I want to be a little more precise this time, so I'm going to add a couple more guides. I'm going to add one to mark the circular shape of the top corner. I'm going to add another guide to mark the circular shape of the bottom corner. And now when I choose my elliptical marquee tool from the toolbar, position my cursor in a corner, left click, hold shift and drag, I should be able to fit it perfectly into that shape. First I want to hold shift on the keyboard to make sure that I'm adding to the current selection. Now I left click, drag. I can let go of shift at this point and hit shift again to make sure that I have a perfect circle. I'm still holding shift down, come over to my other corner, left click, start to drag, let go of shift, press shift again to make sure I have a perfect circle, and drag it down to the guide. Let's go to the other corner, still holding the shift key down, left click, start to drag, let go of shift, press shift again to make sure I have a perfect circle, and drag up to the guide. Alright, now I've got 4 corners selected. Let's select the straight shapes between those corners. Come up to my marquee tool, change that to rectangular marquee, position my cursor right at the straight edge of one of the corners, hold the shift key, left click, drag down to the straight part of the other corner, and over to the opposite guide. Let's grab that straight area at the top and bottom. Again, position my cursor at the straight edge of the upper curve, hold shift, don't forget to hold shift, left click, and drag to the bottom right corner right again where it begins to turn straight and release. Now I want to choose a fill color for my button. Let's make a lovely bright green. Right click on my selection and choose fill. Foreground color, just right. Now I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to make another layer, and this layer will be for the border, because I want to bevel both the border and the button, and I want the border to be a different color. So I go to Layer, New Layer, and I'm going to choose, or type in whatever I want to call it. Now with the selection, I want to choose the color for my border. Now I right-click on my selection and choose Stroke. And I'll make it a 3-pixel stroke. Click OK. Now I have a border around my button, and because both are on different layers, I can apply a different layer effect to each one. Let's start by applying a layer effect to the background color. I switch layers in my layer menu on the bottom right to the background layer. I come to the layer effects, and I'm going to choose Bevel and Emboss. I'm going to soften this up a little bit. And click OK. And that kind of looks nice with a flat border around it, but let's bevel the edge of that border as well. Let's switch layers to that border. Again, come down to Layer Styles. I'm going to choose Bevel and Emboss. And I'm going to change the size of this so it's just 2 or 3 pixels, so it barely stands out. And click OK. Let's turn my guides off by coming to the View. And there's my button. That looks pretty nice. Really no more if I can help it. Once I've got a selection around that button, I come to the Edit menu, and instead of just copying, I'm going to copy Merged. And that's going to ensure that I have all of the effects in my copy as well as both layers. Let's go to the File menu and hit New. And you'll notice that the new canvas it's going to create is exactly the right width and height as the button that I selected and copied. So when I paste in using Control V, I should have the button in a very snug fit. This button's ready to be saved. I'm going to go to the File menu, choose Save for Web, and take a look at my color palette. Looks like there's quite a few colors that can be used here in this button. I'm going to zoom in and see if the quality of the image really is reduced when I drop it down to 128. I don't see any significant difference. How about down to 64 colors? Maybe a little bit of a difference, so I probably don't want to go any lower than 64 colors for this button. And I see that the load time is only 1 second, which is just fine. Ready to choose Save. Put it in the right place. And click Save.